Hi, I would now like to introduce John Sayers, our next speaker. John is a retired public accountant who majored in history. Go figure that combo. He has been a lifelong collector and is recognized internationally as an advanced collector of ocean liner ephemera. He is in his third three-year term on the board of the Ephemera Society of America and in his sixth year on the council of the British Ephemera Society. He writes a monthly column called Ephemera Detective in the New England Antiques Journal and a frequent column titled Ephemera Hunter for Barr's Postcard and Ephemera News. As well, he has contributed articles to the journals of both the Ephemera Society of America and our sister society in England, who likes to be known as the Ephemera Society, and contributes blogs to both societies' websites. His most recent blog for the British Society, titled Dining with Mary Pickford's Brother, went online at the beginning of this month. John has spoken to previous ESA conferences on various aspects of his collection, and we look forward to his latest presentation, Dining at Sea.
You've heard that expression, err in haste, repent at leisure. Last July, in a weak moment, in a burst of support for the society, I said to Barb, look, somebody might break a leg or something before the conference. If you need somebody, I can be your plan B. Last week, I got an email. Never open emails if you're volunteered to be a plan B in the conference. Anyways, it said, John, remember last July? So, yeah, well, we need it in 2 days' time. So, what say, okay, it's got to be about ocean liner stuff. I recall the issue of menus, and somebody had I'm on the conference committee too. Somebody said, well, we don't want all kinds of pictures of menu covers because they get sort of boring. I won't say who on the committee said that, but I thought, okay, I'm taking that to heart, but that's really an issue, not an issue with me anyways. I buy things that speak to me, and I'm sure we all do. And so I said, okay, what food-related items in my collection speak to me? And I want to share that with you. It's a bit of chunk of social history. Yeah, it's a bit of design history. Can't avoid it. But it's fascinating material, and there's always something to learn from it. So I was going to put this on a white background. I'm an accountant. You can't be too flashy, right? But Barb said, how about a blue background, because it's about the sea? I couldn't argue with that one. It's just too logical. So here we go. Fasten your seat belts, prepare your life belts, and all that sort of thing. All I have to do now is find my collector. Oh, here we are.
Right. Oh, I already showed you how to use the laser.
Oh, yeah. I'll probably get it wrong. I thought I had trouble with my left and my right. It's just, so dining at sea, what's it about? Well, recognize I'm an accountant. So there's menu planning. If you're taking a 3-week voyage, how available is fresh food going to be? That sort of impacts on the kind of menus you can produce and continue to produce. What class of service are you offering this to? Because you've got to have a budget, and you've got to make money at this trip. And it wasn't necessarily cruise. If you're going from England to India, you're not going to do it for love. You want to make money at it. How do you create variety in a really long, boring voyage? I mean, what's new today? I wake up, I look out, it's the sea, you haven't sunk, so it's a good start to the day. And so we go on from that, and one of the ways is menu covers, of course. So each day looks a little different. I know there's a microphone.
Yeah, we won't record it without you.
Oh, it can't be recorded without, oh well. I haven't signed the release yet anyway, so. So you have to select a bunch of covers. Then somebody's got to print the menu. There's a woman in Ireland who collects information about printing on board ocean liners. If that's not easy to find, I've sent her one or two things. That's all. There's a fellow at Sotheby's, the book dealers in London. I got talking to him. He's also fascinated with the evolution of printing on board ships. So there's at least two people in this world that are less sane than I am. And then there's special events, and they're always a lot of fun. Just to set the stage, here we are aboard the SS America. It's a beautiful ship. Actually, it's the last German liner that was built in England. 1905, built in England. Everything after that was built in Germany. And that was part of the Kaiser's trying to build a navy to match the British Navy. So you've got to build your shipyards as well. And last year at this show, I got the most fabulous, fabulous booklet about the America, 1905. And it had illustrations of a lot of the fittings on board the ship, the lighting fixtures in the hallways. There's stuff out there tomorrow. You just got to find it. So it was a good year last year. Just imagine this. Here you are in this group. It's not what I'd call a relaxed, friendly environment. You're fighting the fashion parade. So just imagine, you women, you're going on board this, and you can't show up in the same gown 2 nights in a row, but you've got 10 nights to deal with. That's why you don't put everything in the hold, and you can't put everything in your room, your stateroom, no matter how big it is. So there's also a luggage storage on your deck, and you send the munchkins to get what you want. And that, though, means different kind of baggage labels. I digress for 30 seconds. So they will have different things on them. So if you collect shipping baggage labels, there's all kinds of iterations of this sort of thing. Back to food. So I look at this, the Ritz-Carlton restaurant, which tried to emulate the Ritz in London, the Ritz in Paris, and it was so people would feel they were in a hotel, not at sea, not at risk. Later on, Captain Smith and the Titanic proved that there was a certain risk to that. But his story alone is something that's amazing. I like pictures, illustrations with people. This is the Lusitania. You've heard about her. And it's a real photo postcard. It's a great card, but if it only had people, then I could see what it was like, how they sat, how they stood, how they behaved. I mean, you can't tell much from this, but this is the way people think about dining at sea. There's another category called steerage, and this came from a promotional booklet by the Anchor Line around 1899, and it's telling you how wonderful steerage is. Do you know that these are large and exceedingly well-lighted and ventilated and fitted up rooms? You have a separate sleeping berth, like you don't have to get out so the next guy can sleep in it. Married couple, single women, single men are berthed in different compartments. And every comfort and attention is furnished on an ocean steamer. Now, you know what you get now? Free of charge? Look at the bold-faced type. A mattress? You don't have to bring your own mattress. I've heard of people bringing pillows. I see them at hotels. Never seen anybody bringing a mattress. But you had a mattress. You were provided with bedding. Whoa. A mess tins. So plate, mug, knife, fork, spoon, and water can. All that was provided, which is telling you before this wonderful evolution, you had to bring your own in steerage. So we have these people doing well up above and not so well down below. Tables are set for meals. You don't have to set it yourself. Passengers are waited upon by stewards. And it's Henry previously mentioned that people weren't accustomed to dining out.
Well, if you were in steerage, you would come from a part of England or Ireland or Europe. You didn't dine out. You ate at home. If you were lucky, but only if you were really, 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 really lucky, you had 3 square meals a day. So I get aboard this ship, I'm a passenger, and I say, wow, steward's waiting on me? It's just like the rich people above me. There's a liberal supply of provisions. Properly cooked is a very subjective term. If it's English, people will be thinking it's cooked to death. Will be served on the steamers 3 times a day. Imagine that, 3 square meals a day. Wow, I want to travel on this ship again. By the stewards, breakfast at 9, dinner at 1, supper at 9 o'clock. So steerage, we might, first, nobody thinks about steerage in ocean liner travel. It's just looked upon as these poor folks down below decks, and they come and they go, and occasionally we lose a few of them. I don't know about you folks. My parents didn't come over first class. It was politely called tourist by then, and yeah, you didn't bring your own bedding. They had improved it considerably by 1926, but at one time this was the apex of things. My barber in Toronto, Angelo, every barber's called Angelo. He came over from Sicily. Every barber came from Sicily. Just a bit after the Second War. And he said he was dazzled by the food. Like, he wasn't accustomed to having much food. He said in wartime in Italy, we didn't have much food. And to get on board ship, he said probably it was, as far as the ship owners were concerned, as far as you people like me were concerned, it was awfully bare bones stuff. But he said, to me, it was heaven. It was absolutely heaven. I couldn't believe there could be this much food. And I think he was 6 years old at the time. So, an amazing experience, whether you were up there or down in the bowels of the ship. Talking about menus that are handwritten. Can you imagine? Oh, I can't leave here, sorry. I've got a chain attached to me. If you do this for every passenger, now in steerage, you didn't get menus. Come on, you got food. Isn't that enough? So you took what was there, sort of like a MASH TV series thing in the kitchen. But every day, every meal, you've got to handwrite these menus for your passengers, at least one per table. A lot of work without even getting the food on the table. Back it up a step further, you've got to see what's available at what stage of the trip based on the refrigeration issues. I also have 2 display frames out there called Dining at Sea. No overlap at all. But you'll see the list of provisions taken aboard the Cleveland in 1909 for her the first ever world cruise. There's tons and tons of ice taken aboard the ship. So, you know, they could do it, but it really wasn't easy. Ice tends to melt, unlike refrigeration systems. So it's amazing to see what's there and how elaborate it is. The other side of it, and the accountant in me, the business person, leaps to this and says, they're selling booze. Now, it may not seem expensive. There's some good wines on there as well. I think there's a Palmer, isn't there? Anyways, it's good material, but I'm sure they made money on it. Nothing wrong with that. If you've got the money to travel on first class, you've got the money to buy nice wines. But some of these, this is getting a little closer to things, 1903 on the Anchor Line. And it's a menu, and again, imagine writing this out every day. If you look at the contents, preserved salmon, I think it means canned, or sardines, yabba dabba do. My wife would blanch at the thought of sardines. I like them, but that's an acquired taste. And then there is a choice, but it's a choice for, it's priced. They're still doing this in 1901 on the Red Star Line, the Kensington. But the drawing, now we're slopping over into menus a little bit. Cassier was one of the artists who signed their work on menus and postcards. There's some fabulous Red Star Line menu postcard combinations. This one isn't one of them. And Cassier is one of the superb artists who did it. Italian Line, even they were doing it. This is 1890, and I picked this up within the last year at a show, probably it was in England. The other side is wonderful flamboyant material, but we're talking about the contents. This I acquired in a set of material from Dick Sheaf, who contacted me last year, said, John, I got this great little archive of ocean liner material. Well, I'm a sucker for things like that. And so this was first class. I know because we have the trappings around it. And so it wasn't what you'd call a very elaborate detailed menu, but it was 1894. And what was really interesting with this particular menu is the signatures on the back, because along with this archive was a letter from the father of this one woman who was aboard, asking whether the shipping line could seat her at the captain's table on her birthday. Obviously first class. And so here we are. This obviously was her birthday, because on the back, here's the list, and here's Captain James. If I can find, oh, here we are. I'm sure you can all see it anyways, but here we are. So he was good enough to sign it. It all happened. It's a wonderful story in ephemera 120 years after the material was created. And now the issue. Why not pre-print menus? I mean, why are these done handwritten on the ship, or, as we understand it, printed eventually on the ship? You look at the sailing schedule for this particular trip, and this came with the package. And you can tell, the New York, we know when she's leaving from Southampton, we know when she's leaving from New York, and there was turnaround the same day. So surely, even an accountant who doesn't do menus, doesn't cook, can figure out that, all right, it takes this many days to go from A to B. We have 3 meals each day. Here's what we have on offer. Why can't we print these on shore? And I don't have the answer. I just have the questions. I said to someone today, that's halfway there. If you've got the question, then you might find the answer. If you never enunciate the question, you'll never have an answer. I suspect in part it's because these printing was deemed to be so revolutionary to be on board ship. The other thing was they had passenger lists they printed, and later on games, quizzes, and so on. So there would be potential to have to do some last minute stuff, particularly with passenger lists. But anyways, back to menus. Printed at last, Anchor Line. This is one of a series of menus from this same trip in 1913, and it's fascinating to walk through meal by meal, day by day, and see what was no longer could be saved by refrigeration. You could see certain things dropping off the menu, or types of things, because you'd say, all right, the blocks of ice didn't last long enough. And it's, from a research point of view, if you take these and take them even, I don't know what's in the New York Library database, but if you can take these and spread them across a lot of voyages within a certain period of time, I think you could get a really good study on what was keepable and what wasn't, and you could probably impute some costs too. You'll notice whenever you see Russian caviar or caviar of any ilk, you know it's a first-class menu. You know also it's generally a special menu. And the other thing is, at the foot, passengers' attention is directed to the fact, and I'm paraphrasing, that there's a postcard attached to this. Brilliant, brilliant marketing. Because one flap of it perforated, you rip the postcard off. The other thing is, if you're thinking, what the heck am I going to do with my day at sea tomorrow? I've got a whole day to kill. I'm tired of the bridge tournaments. I'm tired of this, tired of that. I think, oh, I guess I can send a postcard because I have one to send to somebody. That's going to kill, depending on whether you're a fast or slow writer, you've got to decide who to send it to whom you want to be boastful. Like, I'm on board ship, but I'm thinking of you nonetheless. And then you've got to write it. And so as a derivative of the dining, you get postcards to send to people to tell them how well you're doing on board ship. Fascinating. This is, some of these look like fun, some of them look like work. And this is Mauritania, it's 1909. I got this one at Allentown some years ago. I know where I got most of these things because I remember them and I know what they mean to me. And again, you look at the list, this is certainly nowhere near steerage. It's not tourist class. And it's helping to promote whoops, wrong one. Helping to promote the shipping line itself, because anyone who saves these, passes them on, is people who say, whoa, look at that, one of those 4 stackers. Bagum. Lusitania. Remember her? And this is part of an issue. That war had been declared. She was still traveling across the Atlantic. And yes, a year later, she was torpedoed. Innocent women and children. We know the story. The dreaded Hun, whatever. What's interesting is, around this same time, I have other things from other ships that were traveling as passenger ships. And I have one postcard in particular, an Allen Line ship, 1915. The person on back has written, you know, we boarded at Montreal. There's quite a few soldiers on board. And I understand that at Quebec City, there's a whole lot more soldiers are going to board the ship. So it wasn't a troop ship. It was a civilian passenger ship. But I guess a whole lot of soldiers somehow wanted to take a holiday in Europe, or maybe, just maybe, it was being used as a quasi-troop ship. Interestingly, that ship was sunk by the same submarine, the U-20, off Kinsale, 3 months after that submarine, the U-20, sank the Lusitania. And so when I know what was on board the Hesperian, I've got to think, you know, despite what everybody says, there must have been some materials of war, be it troops or whatever. You get further into the war. I've got a great Ivernia piece, but it's a, you know, after the dinner there was generally entertainment. And you have Sergeant so-and-so, then you have Mrs. so-and-so singing, and then you had Corporal so-and-so doing this. And again, they were a combination, passenger ship and troop ship. I mentioned these cards that are a combination of postcard and menu. I can't leave this. This is terrible. I might end up taking this with me, which wouldn't be at all nice. If you cut this off right up there where the postcard is, and you mail this, the person is only going to get part of that beautiful image that runs down here. And the person who retains the menu is only going to get a little stub and not know what the heck is up top. It's the kind of thing, if you can find the two together, it's a real jackpot. It's great fun. If you can't, you see the top, you can guess from the graphics what shipping line it is. The bottom is a different story. But it's, again, more entertainment for people. This, you'll see, one of my favorites. There's a whole series of these. and they're menus, but they're printed on a paper that has, you can fold it over twice and use it as a message letter. So you can write a message in it, and one side of it flips over and seals. And I bought one of these from Diane and Rob about 2 or 3 years ago. I have 5 or 6 others, but I'm always looking for more of them. They're beautiful. One other thing about this one. If you look at the menu, it's what I'd call a European menu. It's very much European with a tad American. And it's 1917. Now, Japan was on our side that war. In 1940, and you'll see in the display case, there's an NYK line menu, and it's got 2 panels. It's inside. The left-hand side is all in Japanese. The right-hand side has Japanese dishes and a few European/American dishes. What it's telling you is from this, where we're part of the world, we're part of Europe, by 1940, they're saying, we're Japan. It's the surge of nationalism in there, and we don't care whether people like what's on our menu. We don't care whether they can read or not read Japanese. This is our menu. So it's, again, one learns these things, but they're beautiful, beautiful things. Other things that people celebrated, call it what you want, Armistice Day, Remembrance Day, Veterans Day. And one of the more bizarre things that I've had for years is children's parties, children's menus. Now, children's menus are really hard to find. They tended to be the ultimate throwaway. Adults kept their menus because it was their memory. But Junior, this, though, is a tea party to celebrate Veterans Day, as it were, in 1922. So it's 4 years after the first war ended. These kids, children, would have had brothers killed in the war. They would have had uncles. There would have been casualties within their family for sure. So I cannot, again, here's the question, who's got the answer? They cannot, how could they have a party to celebrate, for the kids to celebrate Armistice Day? And look at the goodies, creme caramel, Bavarians, fruitcake. I mean, party time, and unless it's the war is over, but that really wasn't what November the 11th was supposed to recognize. So what's the answer? Don't know. That's interesting. This is the 3rd saloon. So these are really the bottom of the boat, and they had special children's menus. I do not have a first-class children's menu from that era. Just really, really, really hard to find. But certainly children did not dine with the adults. Not done. Another find in the UK, a dinner for American Rhodes Scholars, class of 1919. So you think of Rhodes Scholars in isolation. You know, my university had a Rhodes Scholar and such. Mine sent 2 Rhodes Scholars. But they bring them all together. And here they were going over in 1919. And you think of these folks, the war had just ended. And well, I'll tell you more as we go. But it was sponsored by Lord Beaverbrook, Max Aiken, publishing entrepreneur, Canadian who made it big in the UK, and Cunard. They both hosted this for American Rhodes Scholars. Here's the menu, brilliantly contrived. California melons, tomato, American, brook trout, Vermont. Whether they were from Vermont or not, who knows? Chicken from Maryland, green corn. They don't say where that came from. Potatoes, Delmonico, peaches, Lincoln, another piece of Lincolnalia. Dessert, coffee. Bollinger, not a bad champagne, but it was a meal designed and contrived to be American and make these scholars feel at home. And I take that in contrast to that Japanese menu 1940 that I was describing. Oh, shall I go back? You're reading. Yeah. I'm sorry. Today's runs. Today's runs. So what you did, this would be their first night. Sorry. Oops. This would be their first night aboard. And generally, you would keep track each day of the distance. They would report how many miles they'd covered that day. And they had pools on board the ship. So you would guesstimate how many miles you had to put it in by a certain time of day. And by the end of the day, they'd take all these entries, and you'd win a prize of probably minimal consequence. But you won, and again, it was something else to do, and it helped you pass the time. Fascinating experience. And then the last page had, well, there's another one with the autographs. But here's the Rhodes Scholar Dinner participants. I went down this class of 1919 listing, and I Googled most of these. I didn't find any politicians that came up on Google. I didn't find any horse thieves. Maybe there's not a lot of difference in those two. Anyways, I didn't find anyone of note out of this whole group. But then you think, yeah, this was just after the war. Your brightest and best might have already been over in Europe fighting. And so these may be the ones that were too young to go or didn't want to go or whatever. But it's a fascinating chunk of history. I showed this to Sarah Thomas when she was the chief librarian at the Bodleian in Oxford. And she was blown away. She said, you know, wait till our Rhodes department, scholar department, hears about this. Because they have a separate department to handle their Rhodes Scholar intake. And she said, they'll be crazy about this. So I said, you're getting it later, but not sooner. Royal events are always fun. Dynamite cover, absolutely dynamite cover. You come to dinner, you see this at your place, and you got to say, wow, you know, it's eye candy. And you know who it is. So this is 1953, Queen Elizabeth coronation. And you look at the contents, and it's, again, it's sort of like they did for the Rhodes Scholars. So all these things have their spin to them. Edinburgh, as in Duke of Edinburgh. A la Reine. Buckingham, as in Buckingham Palace. So you go through this, brilliantly, cleverly contrived to make you feel good about this entire event. I'll keep going because there's a couple more of this type of thing. They did a series of covers, 1937, another coronation. Great covers for the whole of Coronation Week. And it wasn't just Cunard, it was other lines that had these royalty-type covers. And then in 1911, I picked this up in England from June Jameson in, I guess, last year or two. 1911 coronation voyage, Canadian Pacific. And, you know, of course, the further back you go, the more difficult it is to find these things. But again, the menu is styled to sort of have a kind of a royal spin to it. And then at the top, long live the king. And then the name of the ship, Empress of Britain. And I've found different bits and pieces from this ship and that coronation voyage over the last 4 or 5 years. At wildly different sources. Another royal event. In 1935, it was King George V's 25th anniversary on the throne. So they had a Royal Naval Review at a place called Spithead. And so the whole British fleet, which was substantial, lined up for review by the king in the royal yacht. The entrepreneurial shipping lines issued, put out 3-day packages for people to go and be out there watching the review take place. And there was 3 ships, the Majestic, Berengaria, one other one, that did this. And I have lots of material from this one, chunk of material from the other, and not much from the third, but I'm still looking. What's interesting about this was a microcosm of British society. So on the list, and you can picture other issues with this. Somebody named Rudyard Kipling and Mrs. Kipling. Did you know there was a Mrs. Kipling? I found out when I looked at the passenger list. Frederick Elgar. And so it had Mrs. Oswald Mosley. Oswald Mosley was the head of the British Fascist Party. You can imagine the dynamics, but she was one of the Bloomsbury group girls. The Parnells, Charles Parnell, famed in Irish history as a, what would you call it, activist is a nice term. But these 3 women were, these sisters were all MPs. They were aboard the ship. Think of the challenges of, with folks like this, part of dining is making sure that you don't have fist fights at tables. How do you put them with other people and put them into the right tables with the right chaps and the right women? I don't have the answer. It must have been one heck of a job. If you've ever had to do, I'm sure you have, tables arrangements for wedding receptions. I mean, it's planning a crossing of the Alps is small compared to that. And this is pretty much the same way. So here you are, you've got to put all these people in, and you know there'll be 1 or 2 people say, I don't want to sit with that hideous Lady Eaton, that Canadian woman from Toronto. So you got to do a little redeployment. And I think it's the Eaton family this particular archive came from, indirectly. So, you know, it's fun to think of what happens, the dynamics on board these ships when there's dining. So the menus are only the veneer, and the rest is what makes it happen, and all the fascinating underpinnings. Dining in wartime. I was given this by, I did a display in Niagara Falls at the museum there, and I had a gentleman get in touch with me, and he had a menu that he wanted to give me. And so, okay, so I met with him, and he said, I got this during the war. I went over on the Queen Elizabeth with, 15,000 of my closest friends. And he said, I didn't get, this was for an officer. I wasn't an officer. So I was wedged in. I didn't ask him how he came by this. But he said, I haven't been well. And again, we all know about ephemera. I haven't been well. If anything happens to me, my kids are just going to dump this in the garbage. So would you like it? After I did a couple of cartwheels, I said yes. I love it. He didn't want to be paid for it. He just wanted to make sure that it survived, which is just like all of us. We want to make sure these things survive. And so 1 whole day's meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on there. And so again, I said to this fellow, what, you didn't get menus? He said, no, we just took what was given to us. Whatever was put on our plates, our trays, we ate it. Either you ate it or you went hungry. So it was another insight into travel, but travel in wartime. And there's another little piece to this, 2 more. This is a dinner menu, and it's just after the war. It's on a, if you notice, I feel so anchored here. It's the, whoops, wrong one. It's the CAT, Lady Rodney. And CAT is Canadian Army Transport. So all these things were no longer SSs or RMS. They became HMT, His Majesty's Transport. His Majesty's Hospital Ship, HMHS. HMAT, His Majesty's Australian Transport. This was the Canadian Army Transport, but it was a Canadian national steamship, did trips into the West Indies. but they grabbed it. So this was dinner. Not exactly as elaborate as some that we might have seen or might have expect, but boy, if this was December 1945 and you were heading home and you were still alive, this was probably the nicest meal you could ever want to have. Just the highlight, one of the highlights, and somebody kept this menu. Even on hospital ships. Now this, I mentioned hospital, this is HMHS Maine, which tells me it's His Majesty's hospital ship, but why would they call it the Maine? Some of these ships were British, but they were being used in American theaters of war, in the Mediterranean, for example. So you would find them, and this wouldn't have necessarily been her initial name. But here we have a wonderful breakfast, dinner, tea, and it's 1942, just off North Africa. So you dined well because, you know, I have one more little thing of this. You dined well because next week you might not be dining at all. You might not be alive to dining. And you think about these people, and there's folks still doing it today who are going off to fields of war and not being sure that they're going to come back again. It's got to be a scary feeling, absolutely scary. Now, coming back, this, I believe that the expression knowledge is power, and this is from the Queen Mary, and at a flea market 10 years ago or more, I came across breakfast, lunch, and dinner menus, all postcard sized. And I looked at it July 4th, 1946. Wow, pretty austere. Oranges, prunes, whatever it turns you on, as it were. Rolled oats, grape nuts, wheat cereal, and then toast, preserves. And you start thinking about this July 4th. And I did a little digging, and some would call it research, but not. I don't want to glorify it. And she was still doing war bride trips at that time, 1946. This would have been a war bride's menu. And so you're coming from England or France, anywhere in Europe, and you look at this menu, and it's like my barber. Oranges, hello, haven't seen those for ages. Preserves with sugar in them? Whoa, that's amazing. So we look at it today and say, boy, I wouldn't pay very much for that menu. If you were coming to a new life in a new country, this menu would be one of the highlights of your life. And obviously, this person kept it. And they kept it for as long as they lived, because these things normally come up at flea markets out of estates. And the good part is they actually do come up. Never seen another one, I might add, of these war bride menus. But when you see something like this, you sort of do your homework and you know it. And so, welcome to America, land of oranges and preserves and all these things. Yes? Okay. I'll go fast. Quick one. This has nothing to do with shipping. This is my late Uncle Sid, who fought in North Africa. And in 1942, this was found in his papers after he died. He had this postcard, and it was a menu, 1942, Christmas Day. And all his stories about North Africa fighting, he was around Tobruk, were about sand. Everything you ate had sand in it. And I thought, I guess what doesn't say here, but this wonderful menu probably had sand as an accompaniment. And the other thing is, it's on a postcard. They ate pretty sparingly normally. A postcard, guess what people will do? They'll mail it back home. And mom and dad and spouse back home will say, oh, whoa, they must be dining well. Bagum, they must be dining well. So it's partly a bit of a propaganda thing, I think, either implicitly or explicitly. But Sid had kept them. It was his memories. Party time, some great covers that capture the full spirit of Gala nights. a gala night menu. And again, you just look at these and say, neat, neat, neat stuff. A farewell dinner. And this is Donaldson line, pretty plebeian shipping line, neat, neat menu. And the contents are spelled out as well. And this was the Athenia, which was the first passenger ship torpedoed in the Second War. Not a very nice distinction to have. And down here, no, next one. Great. Now, this was just after Prohibition had ended. But throughout Prohibition, it was party time every day on board ship once it was outside of territorial limits. So this tells it all as far as the previous 13 years had been. 1957 Holland American Line, lovely covers. This one, if you read the foot, if you can't read it, I'll read it to you. Coffee will be served in smoke rooms and Palm Court. Guess who goes to the smoke rooms? Okay, men, off to the smoke rooms. Guess who goes to the Palm Court to discuss child rearing, crocheting, knitting, all those important things for women? Off the women go to the Palm Court. And it was just the way things were even at that time. It took a long time to get women into smoking rooms. Maybe it was a good thing for them. And then there was Easter, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln's birthday, July the 4th, Christmas, New Year's, and so on. All these things had absolutely super gorgeous menus. And that's all, folks. I made it. Phew. I think.
Questions?
Oh, yes, Rob.
John, I wonder if the opportunity to publish onboard newspapers from wireless transmissions might have been a concomitant of the printing of the menu.
Yes, and I have those going back quite a ways. And they always highlight by Marconi. It came by Marconi. And that was, I think, again, part of making people feel comfortable at sea in case there was, God forbid, a disaster of any kind.
I understand that there were caricature artists on board who would make caricature hand-done postcards.
You're talking about the Demuths in particular.
Not.
Oh, okay. The Demuths, the two of them, they were American. They sailed on Canadian Pacific cruise ships in the 20s and 30s. I have a number of their postcards. I collect postcards too.
Well, it's not Demuth like Charles Demuth, the artist.
It's, what were their names? I just see this sign, the last name. They were both artists, D-E-M-U-T-H. And I actually am going after, there's an auction, I won't tell you where. And I'm going to be telephone bidding, and I want it. And it's a portfolio of these Demuth drawings from in the original folder from a 1928 cruise of the Empress of Scotland. And this is one of these things, you know, when you get to that stage, when you're as sick and demented as that, you have to have it. So it's one of these where you just keep going up till you get it. But anyways, then I'm not telling you where it is. And there were other neat artist signed things. Is this break time? Yes. Oh. Oh, okay. One more question if there is one. People want a break.
Okay, I get it. Thanks. Hi, okay, time for a break. And actually, we're running a little ahead again, so that is wonderful. By the way, I failed to mention before, and I wanted to, Michael Osborne could not be with us today. He became ill last week, and in fact, when he sent me the note to let me know he had to cancel, he sent a selfie of himself in the hospital bed with, you know, all the tubes and everything. And I was like, gee, I really didn't need that much proof, but selfies will go anywhere now. So that's why we did not have Michael Osborne here today. So, and I do thank John, because not only did he come through, he came through in 2 days. So that was very good. One last thing before I let you go on the break. I wanted to let you know about our theme for next year's conference, which is going to be sports and play. So just kind of wanted to put that headline out for all of you. And obviously, as the calendar rolls on, you'll hear more about that, but that's next year's theme. So that being said, we now have a break until 3:45, so that's 25 minutes. And the exhibits are open across the hall.